Deadpool and Wolverine break records as Hollywood executives literally have mental breakdowns. Coming from Deadline, and this is actually part of a series they did. From Deadline, Hollywood's mental health crisis, how job losses are impacting industry executives as LinkedIn is labeled a pit of despair. And from The Hollywood Reporter, multiple records broken by Deadpool and Wolverine's box office. Hollywood executives have literally lost their minds because they went in a direction where they weren't serving what customers actually wanted. They weren't making things people actually wanted to see. They were making things that they wanted to see. This series goes on to discuss many mental health issues Hollywood executives are actually having as they suffer through a crisis because they no longer can actually get jobs making things people don't want to see. Here's what Deadpool's doing. So far, it's the sixth biggest domestic opening of all time among any film. The biggest was Avengers Endgame at $355 million. Deadpool and Wolverine did $211 million. It's the fourth biggest Hollywood superhero opening ever, behind only Avengers Endgame, Spider-Man No Way Home, and Avengers Infinity War. It's the biggest R-rated opening movie of all time, both domestically and globally. And the two movies behind it were Deadpool and Deadpool 2. It's the biggest July opening of all time domestically. Deadpool and Wolverine surpassed The Lion King at $191 million, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2 at $169 million, and even Barbie and The Dark Knight Rises. But instead of figuring out how to get themselves straight and use all of their talents, all their contacts, all their experience to make movies and TV shows people want to see, instead, unfortunately, and it's really not funny, Hollywood executives are losing their jobs, losing their minds, and have nowhere left to go. One called LinkedIn a pit of despair. Another feels an overwhelming lack of purpose. Yet another complained about simply feeling stuck. Yeah, it's a little hard to have a purpose when all your purpose is to be self-indulgent, try to push your ideology that people just don't want and aren't interested in. For myriad Hollywood executives who have lost their jobs over the past year, finding work has not been the only challenge they've had to overcome. It's also the feeling of hopelessness that comes with being out of the game with little or no promise of ever returning. Quote, "It's almost a state of panic because the industry is so challenged," lamented one out-of-work TV executive. "I was having these chest pains, and for a second I thought, is this my heart? But ultimately it was panic. I went to see my doctor who did a bunch of tests and everything is ultimately fine. But he asked, 'Do you want to talk to somebody?' And I was like, 'Listen, I know what the issue is. I didn't feel like I needed to go talk to a therapist. And I know what the issue is, and a therapist isn't going to help me find a job.' That said, if someone you know or you are having panic attacks, it is good to see a doctor and it is good to see a therapist. These people have problems that go way beyond trying to find a job. And they ought to be talking to professionals about it." Quote, "The days are long," adds a jobless woman with decades of experience in marketing. "I am bored, and it's hard for me because all my friends work. Even my friends that are not in the industry. Everybody works. I'm kind of miserable." A highly experienced but unemployed executive who, like the other executives, asked Deadline not to use his name for fear it would impact his job search, said the daily barrage of headlines about contraction in Hollywood don't do his psyche any favors. With the state's Employment Development Department reporting losses of more than 12,000 entertainment jobs from May 2023 to May 2024, coupled with threats of even more layoffs at Warner Brothers, Paramount, and Disney. Help wanted signs are not exactly plastered all over the studios these days. And there will be more layoffs. And the layoffs might affect the jobs of people who currently have jobs, and that's a terrible thing. But it's even worse if you've been looking for a job and all of a sudden the job market now has a flood of even more people who are looking for jobs, making the market even more competitive. This industry is in deep, deep trouble, and it's going to take an extremely long time, even for people who have the skills, even for people that have the connections. It's just not the time to go looking for a job in Hollywood. But at the very least, you need to know what the market actually wants. And you need to be able to convey that to the people that you want to work with. Quote, "I mean, look, you can only go through so many rounds of interviews where you are easily an exceptionally qualified person before you realize there are more people out there than positions," the executive said. Am I more hireable now as a mid-50s senior executive who hasn't worked in 2 years than I was 2 years ago? No, you are not. And you have to use your network and figure out what you can do to monetize your network. Turn your network into money, into opportunities. That's not easy if you're used to just sitting around and taking a big check and doing whatever it is that you want to do all day. But in the age of layoffs, a tough economy, and Hollywood getting reinvented, and especially artificial intelligence, everyone has to learn to become entrepreneurs. Always understand what the customer might want, and always understand what you can do to provide that. What he and other out-of-work executives are experiencing are various levels of grief, a process that can be painful, but should never be overlooked, advises career coach Laverne McKinnon. Quote, grief is an experience that's not specific to death, says McKinnon, who specializes in working with members of the entertainment and tech industries. Grief is the normal reaction to any type of loss, including loss of a career or loss of an industry. And I think many people don't recognize how they're grieving. I'm going to say 8 out of 10 clients don't even realize that they're grieving because it's not like someone died. And so they have a lot of shame around how they're feeling and why they're feeling so helpless, hopeless, and powerless. And it's like, there's a reason why this is part of the mourning process. Because this thing that you love, this thing that you identified with, this thing that you're attached to, it no longer exists. Well, that's harsh and insightful, and it's absolutely true. Quote, when one is not given permission to grieve or even acknowledge their grief, it leads to a loss of resiliency, adds McKinnon. And whether someone chooses to try to return to the entertainment industry or pivot to a new career, resiliency is required for any type of job search, as well as long-term career search and fulfillment. Take the opportunity to reground oneself in your values and in your purpose so that you can make a decision from a place of empowerment as opposed to helplessness, hopelessness, and powerlessness. If you happen to be a mentally ill executive in Hollywood that hasn't figured out how to get onto the Deadpool and Wolverine train or Inside Out 2 train of actually just focusing on making things people want to see, then speaking to this therapist is an excellent option. I like how she presents her ideas. Quote, I think this past year has been one of the toughest, said top Hollywood executive recruiter Jamie Waldron, senior partner, global head of sports for media and entertainment at Modern Executive Solutions. It's the toughest I've seen since probably around 2009, when it was really tough too. I think my biggest challenge as a recruiter to make sure that, to the boundaries that I can do it, people feel good and don't have this the world is ending and there is no hope feeling. Because good people always get hired. A lot of times candidates who become unemployed think they're either never going to get another job, or especially if they're later in their career, quote, oh my God, this is it and this is the end. It's getting them past that. It's not a doom factor. It's not a crisis, and it will get better. Just don't ask how long the job search will take, because coaches like McKinnon can't say. Quote, no one has experienced the acute level of uncertainty that people are living with today. Our minds literally cannot tolerate not knowing, says McKinnon. So when clients ask me that question, all I can say is, I don't know. We don't know. If anyone tells you an answer, it's like they're just pulling information out of their butts, which is why I always go back to values and life purpose, because there are choices to be made. You have to go inward, not outward, in order to make those decisions. The hope comes from using this pause as an opportunity to do that personal development work. Some people love it and embrace it. Other people are really resistant because they're like, just tell me what I need to do, even if I have to run back-to-back marathons. And I'm like, quote, no one can tell you that. This is an opportunity to use the pause to get really clear on what's important to you. You have to look at what your priorities are and what you can really contribute to the industry if that's what your hope is to still function in this industry. What do you really have to contribute? Not how do you want to use it to please yourself, to indulge yourself in vulgar fantasies about pushing an ideological agenda. That's what happened for Karen Jones, a veteran PR executive who left HBO in 2022 after 23 years with the company. She took a year to decide what to do next. It must be nice to have enough money that you could just take a year off and think about what you might want to do next. Not everybody is in that position. Quote, it was just a deep amount of reflection, recalls Jones. I didn't take it lightly. I was in therapy. I was talking to my family, trusted advisors. I was talking to my financial manager. I mean, there were many different factors, both internal and external, that went into it. But ultimately, I had always known that I wanted to do something else, that I wanted to have another chapter. She now works as a leadership and career coach and advises folks who are both employed and out of work in Hollywood. Well, people sometimes will say, gosh, you seem like you've just figured it all out, and you've made this pivot, Jones says. I've tried to be very transparent about what the journey of the in-between feels like. It's messy. It is uncertain, and you can't power your way through it. You have to give it some space in order to transition to something else, or even when you find a new opportunity, to not still be carrying the baggage of whatever it was that you left behind. Longtime producer Robert Morton, who is best known for running Late Night and The Late Show with David Letterman in the 1980s and the 1990s, still carried some of that baggage when he made a successful transition to real estate a decade ago. Although he quickly realized that his talents were transferable, he still solves crises, and instead of looking at ratings each morning, he looks at what's sold and what remains on the market. He admits his Hollywood ego used to get in the way. Quote, I was seeing my name as the first credit on a roll on every show that I did, to seeing my name on a real estate sign on Sundays, advertising an open house. There was a bit of an ego thing where I thought, oh, F. Everybody that I impressed in my old business, they're seeing these signs in front of the Brentwood Country Mart. They're seeing these signs in the Palisades. It's where the concentration of all the successes in the business lives. And there was a moment where the ego hurt. It's not that big of a step down to go into another career. There's nothing wrong with that. Just do something where you could be productive. Then something changed. As he became more successful at selling, his former colleagues and friends were eager to learn his secret of living life outside of Hollywood. Quote, every time I have an open house at a property, somebody comes by and says, how did you do it? You're so lucky. What do I have to do? And almost daily I get calls from peers in the entertainment business who say to me, how do I do it? I want to get out. It's like they're in prison. I help them break out of the yard. I basically told them that you just have to be proud of whatever you do and don't feel like you're giving up something so precious and so wonderful. And then in the comments, you see some industry people who have gone through and observed these kinds of things. From Anonymous, it could always be worse. You could be a recent film grad, loaded down with debt, and who's just discovering that there are no jobs and your degree isn't valued outside the industry. And from Kevin Westmore, welcome to the world that Hollywood crews have been dealing with for 2 years now. No income, mental anguish. Join the club. Anonymous says, there was a day where these corporate entities actually cared about their employees and would make internal changes to help their employees stay or transition out comfortably. Yes, there were still layoffs, but it wasn't like it is today. Now CEOs who made tens of millions of dollars are more than happy to lay off thousands of employees in one fell swoop with minimal consideration for their transition in order to increase the stock price 20 cents. It's gross. The question is, when are these people going to understand that the trade-off of stock options is not worth it and revolt against the current system? And from someone with a finance background, Anonymous says, this is simply the fallout of institutional investors streamlining the corporations that own the studios and create what we now call content, which is the perfect descriptor for a commodity business. What is needed is to get back to the craft of filmmaking and find investors willing to back that craft. Let me know what you think of all this in the comments below. Always love to see your ideas. Please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications, give me a thumbs up, and I'll see you again soon with another story. And if I don't see you, I will miss you.